there is no matter, there is no energy. It's probably all just matter could be simply crystallized light. Energy could be more profoundly patterns in information. This is, these are quite bold statements, but uh, we could build a case for them. Definitely, if we look at, first of all, if we look at well, the commonly known ancient theories about relativity, both special and general, it, it plays very nasty tricks on the perception of reality if you look into them deeply. How so? Mm, Well, that is quite obvious and quite popular, and uh, many times we look at it naively, at the famous Einstein's equation about energy equals mc squared, and it's like a perfect print for a Mac, or well, it accounts for a lot of merchandising, but it, it, even for me, quite recently, I started to look at it differently in a more profound way. And the idea is that an equivalence between energy and matter, at first glance, if you look at it deeply, it's quite outstanding. So it comes to say that you can interpret that as all matter is just is a form of energy. Um, well, the first glance could say that matter and energy could be interchangeable, um, but like it's like remaining in the surface. If you think about it's quite asymmetrical. It's not symmetrical at all because you can say that energy is more fundamental than matter, and matter is just. Sometimes I like to think, and it's kind of a poetic way of saying it, but I think it's not so crazy. It's not so far away from some truth, that matter is just crystallized light. Look at the question is astoundingly beautiful in its simplicity and the profoundness of it, because it involves only three things. It involves energy, matter, or mass, and velocity of light, the speed of light. And the thing in Einstein's theories is that what it makes me profoundly um, enjoy them and I admire them, and it's surprising to me, and never-ending layers of uh, appreciation of that is it comes up from extreme lateral thinking by Einstein, which is uh, the typical nonconformist mind, which tries to look the base layer of everything and doesn't rely on the surface. So, in, mm, you know that there are two variants for the relativity theory, the special and the general. They come from taking to the extreme, taking to the late, taking to the limit. Very, very simple observations. One is that that is really crazy. The velocity of speed of light, the speed of light being constant, no matter how quickly you move. That is deeply uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable if you think. If you think if you imagine yourself moving at the speed of light, and next to you goes another ray of light parallel with you at the very same speed, at the speed of light. From outside, it looks very obvious that they move at the same speed. But if you jump into one of the rays and look at the other one, you do not see the other one uh, still next to you, but you still see it moving at the speed of light relative to you. You can digest that easily. I think I think you have not thought about it properly. But it's extremely unintuitive. But the relativity theory, the special kind, it comes out about this very same observation. So instance say, okay, that is true. We can instead of that, in order to accommodate that contradiction, we just say that time dilates and space contracts, and you make it work. It's very strange, and from that, if you derive that mathematically to the deepest end, you found that the energy is equal to mc squared. That is deeply disturbing. In the other side, the special relativity and, and general relativity theory, it comes from from another deep reasoning until the end, taken from very simple observation. And it's famously called the equivalence principle, which if you imagine yourself being in an elevator and you can think of two situations and two scenarios. One is that you stay still and you feel pushed against the floor because it's gravitational um, attraction towards the earth, towards down. You cannot distinguish this scenario from another one, which is equivalent and it's totally indistinguishable, which is that you are out in space without gravitation and you are simply accelerated upwards. So you feel your inertia pushing you down against the floor of the elevator. I'm taking those two scenarios as um, theoretically, practically indistinguishable. It derives that gravitation is not a force, but instead of that is an acceleration. It's an acceleration, and there's no force involved. It's just related to the curvature of the geometry of space-time. So that concludes that even light, which is massless, is affected by gravity. There's no mass involved. There is um, no force between the sun and the ray of light. Even in spite of that, the light is bent when it passes next to the sun, as it was famously demonstrated in um, with, with this eclipse, solar eclipse that did happen in 1919, if I'm right on the dates, but don't matter. So that what strikes me the most is that there are things which seem completely opposite and incompatible, and they're reconciliated in a very profound way when you look at them from first principles and take them to the end. Um, and this reconciliation is it's intellectually satisfactory. You the more you reflect on them, the more the deepest you go into appreciate deeper layers of this phenomenon. Um, this equivalence, for me, it resounds very deeply into the equivalence between energy and mass, because They seem very related, but when you look deeply, how is mass? What is mass actually? What is matter actually? If both energy and mass could curve exactly the same behavior from outside, you cannot distinguish if the curvature if in space-time is due because of mass distribution or is due to energy distribution. Is it looks like energy and mass are simply artifacts of perspective about an underlying deeper phenomenon. And something connecting to this, which could provide an explanation or an interesting perspective, is what is more or less famously said that the proton mass, but when you look at matter, it seems solid. As you look at the table, the person in front of you, and the screen in front of you, it looks tangible, but you start to dive into that. You can say that, okay, if you look, it's made of atoms, and atoms are mostly empty space. It's mostly empty matter. Uh, it's well known that the nucleus, which accounts for, let's say, almost 100% of the mass of the atom, electrons around him, most of the mass is in a very tiny, very tiny, very tiny space within the atom, which is the nucleus. It contains very tiny space contains all of the matter. You can say, okay, but it's mostly empty, but at least we can say that there's something tangible inside the atoms, which, okay, this is what constitutes mass, the way we used to think about it. And then you look into into the nucleus, and you say, okay, but this is made of more fundamental parts. We know that they're made of protons and neutrons, and those in in in, in those sequences, those are made of quarks instead. So there's a more fundamental layer, which is quarks. Okay, but quarks are the most fundamental thing, and it could be very tiny, but at least we have something tangible that we can call matter, that we can call mass. Okay, good enough. And then we start to realize that most of the mass, 98% of the mass of the proton, is not due to these very same masses of the three quarks that compose them. Instead, it's all related. Most of the mass is attributed to the gluons that that carries the strong nuclear force, tightening together the quarks, building up the proton. And it goes once more to be comfortable, be uncomfortable again, because only 2% of the mass of the most fundamental thing that we can think about is due to something tangible, the particle itself. The rest is mass, which is somehow apparent and is attributed to these gluons moving very quickly and very frequently and being interchanged between two quarks. So there's no mass involved. It's just something apparent from the outside, which is not material but is attributed to energy. And we can say, okay, so energy, this somehow this kinetical energy amounts for most of the mass that we can attribute to the universe. There is still this 2% mass that which is attributed to the rest mass of the quark. And you can say, okay, that is tangible. And then you look one step deeper and they say, okay, this is all the rest mass of this fundamental particle called quark. It's not actually mass itself. It, it is somehow the apparent behavior that results of the particle by interacting with a field which is massless, is not material, which is the Higgs field. And there are some what we call mass is this apparent inertia, this apparent resistance to acceleration that it involves the interaction of the quarks with the Higgs field, with the Higgs particle, and there's nothing material into it. Once more, we go a deeper level, and we can see that there's nothing material to that one, which we call mass. It's only some relational thing to a underlying field, to an underlying relationship between particles, which seems to have no mass themselves, but the only thing that constitute mass is movements and interactions um, constituting energy, which from outside we can feel, we can interpret, and it behaves as mass because it curves space-time in a way similar um, to the way in which simple mm, energy without any relation to mass will curve the same way the space-time around it. So it starts to look to me that this mass is just like an abstraction, an artifact of perspective useful in order to think about how energy interacts with the space-time. So when things are attracted one another, it's not because the gravitation, as we call it, as the attraction between the masses um, of these two objects. It's just that the energy localized into these places looks from outside as particles, and this energy simply crosses the space-time in a way that it creates attraction, it creates uh, the formation of the space-time around them, and become and feels from outside perspective easy fine grain or coarse grain interpretation that they look like they attract one another. It feels like we can interpret that there's no mass, there's no matter. It's just a currency, it's just an artifact of perspective, it's just a mechanism for our intuition to work with accounting for this way the energy deformates space-time. It feels to me profound because my intuition is that things are tangible and there is matter outside, but it seems for me a good analogy and an idea that I entertain a lot recently is that these particles are kind of wheels in a flow. The flow is the fabric of the space-time. Uh, what, for instance, what the strong nuclear force does is that it acts at a very narrow scale. It dissipates and makes it very irrelevant with distance very quickly. So it acts at a very short scale. So it's like every time this movement, this energy, these interactions want to go away, it starts to have any effect. And well, probably the best way to think about it and to connect with something which will make Einstein very uncomfortable, as it's well known. It's quantum mechanics, quantum mechanics, and quantum physics. And quantum physics states that what we call empty or void is not so at all. It's not empty at all. The thing is that the void is full of boiling particles, pairs of particles and antiparticles coming out and and, and, and annihilating one another very quickly. it's if you look deeper into scales, the uncertainty principle lets you to violate the conservation of energy in a very tiny periods of time. The tinier the scale, the tinier the time, and the smaller, the shorter the distance. It lets you violate this momentarily, this conservation, this conservation of energy in wilder wilder range. So the the more the zoom you do, the wilder you see this quantum form, quantum boiling of particles coming out and disintegrating all the time very quickly. So what you can see in an analogy that, if I'm right, Bell did, is that it's like the ocean from an airplane. You look at the surface, it looks flat, and you get into that, and you can see that there's waves, and there's these waves contains foam. So if you look at deeper resolutions, you can see that it's not flat. There's no empty at all. It is full of crazy activity, which from outside seems like um, nullifying. You can see the flat surface, but it is not. And with, with strong nuclear force acting at these tiny scales, what we can do is like we perform. It sustains wheels and or knots, if you want to think of this analogy as a string. There's a string and there's a knot. And the knot, the string is the string, but it's not made of anything. It's just a string. The same way that the particle is not a particle, it's just a perturbation of the quantum form of the um, crazy boiling of the structure of the fabric of space-time at a very tiny scale. You can see there's no particle, there's no mass. It's just a knot in the fabric. It's just a whirl in the flow of, of this of this underlying fabric, and that is that is quite amazing to me to try to think like that and making think that maybe that could be a more fundamental explanation and look at the particles and matter as an artifact of perspective, and what actually we have is quantum boiling, this fabric of space-time that is knotted, tied together by this interaction, which we call nuclear force, and that is and how I can come to the idea of the concept of the poetic statement of energy mass as crystallized light, because what, what light, we can see that there's no mass, that is energy, but why c squared, why the constant velocity of, of light, it's so fundamental. It looks to me really strange. I can say, but definitely it points towards something important with light. It's the constant rate. It's like an exchange rate between space and time and energy and matter. Something which I cannot comprehend fully in my mind. It's happening around light, and it, it, it couldn't be by chance. It couldn't be by chance that is there the, like like the exchange rate between space and time and energy and matter should be the key somehow. And it is easy to me to think about that as mass as crystallized light. Um, that is so crazy to me. One thing, in, can we take can we take this one step further? Okay, if matter is not fundamental, but energy it is, and these relationships and these localities and these knots and wheels into the fabric of space-time are what we call matter, but actually is energy. and violations and local minima, local perturbations stable in the fabric of space-time, and that is energy, that is made of energy, and it looks from outside like matter. But what is energy? Is made of is energy fundamental? How can we uh, think about energy not simply as a given concept, a given action that we take as granted and use it as a base of our reasoning, but what is actually energy? What is made of? If, if we look, if we look into this quantum boiling, into this quantum form for the fabric of space-time, it seems like energy is all around. But when we look energy from outside, like something like it's not mutually uh, mutually annihilated, but it's something that from outside looks like in a certain direction. It's able to perform work, and work is it's a very related when we think about basic thermodynamics, which nothing in thermodynamics is basic, by the way, because it's all full of, it looks naive all the time. Every single equation is like two or three variables. So naive, but it's so profound, so tricky, and so difficult to grasp. Energy, work is a special form of energy. Yes, and we say that energy, which can, which is oriented in a certain direction and could have some effect overall, and does not contradict and goes into erratic directions um, overall, but it's somehow aligned. We call it work. Um, Maybe we can think about this energy that we can see that it's localized and trapped into something that we call particles, or something that from outside seems to have an effect in the surrounding. It looks like some coordination. It could happen some coordination in this quantum void, in this random noise that we can see that at some point there are some alignments which work in a particular direction for a period of time and becomes stable, and it looks like we can think about energy as some kind of order pattern and this quantum crazy noise, which we can call information. We can call energy, we can think of energy. If we allow our minds to give this leap and this concept, this leap between concepts, we can think of energy as information, a short order information, a pattern out of the random noise that which happens constantly all around, all the time. And when these quantum oscillations become sorted around some attractor, if we take the term from chaos theory, we can see that there is an attractor like a local minima when this energy revolves around and from outside becomes like looks like having some effects around it, and we attribute it like um, mass. We can call it mass, like a currency for us to account for energy. And this this energy seems to simply come out of uh, arising patterns uh, from the noise and the underlying craziness of the quantum void. What if there is not only if the, what if we can say that not only matter is an artifact of perspective, is an illusion that we can use in our minds too. think about this mm, from from an overview, from a high perspective. What if not only not matter is not fundamental, but energy is not fundamental itself, but the only fundamental thing is the quantum noise, and this energy is an emergent pattern, something that we can see. We zoom out and we can see that there is some fluctuations that happens to uh, um, align these oscillations for a particular location, for a particular time. That will be crazy. There's no matter, there's no energy, there is only patterns and information. There are some theories which revolve around these ideas, which obviously they're not mine. But um, maybe I've mentioned some other talks about some other discussions about this, and it's the anti-de Sitter conformal field theory, which is quite related to the holographic to the holographic principle. Um, but once more, the holographic principle it's it's uh, it's so great because it connects uh, gravity with quantum in a not definitive way, but definitely it points towards some common direction for both of them. Because we say, okay, we have a region in space time, and if we look into that and try to account for how much information can we provide into a region of space time, into a volume, without getting it so dense that it becomes and collapses into a into a black hole, which is somehow like the rate limit of the information density that the space-time can contain. We assume that the bigger the space, the bigger the volume, the more information that we can contain into that, within that. And some clever people knowing how to do maths which demonstrate and calculate that that is not the case, and this is an assumption that we cannot take, and it's proven false by the mathematics and the equations, because they say that what is the limitation is not the volume, but the surface of the volume, which is strange. That's the reason why it is called the holographic principle. That the rate limit, the maximum density of the information that the space-time may contain, uh, it's related not to the volume, but to the surface containing and enclosing that volume. And that is related to the hologram, because the hologram is like a surface that contains information about the third dimension, the profound in the image, and that is what is called why it's called the holographic. That is the holographic component to this. It's really strange. And then it comes Juan Maldacena and comes out with this anti-de Sitter conformal field theory, which details details away, because I haven't dived that into that myself. But I only try to comprehend, at least for now, um, from from the surface, from the boundary, if we can do so. It says that the universe itself, the way we do it, uh, we can we can encode it in the surface, the limit, the universe itself. So it the the full dimension of the universe could be like a fake or an artifact coming out of uh, a space with one less dimension, which we can call the surface or the boundary of this mm, apparent universe. And everything is encoded in the surface, and it's encoded in the way of uh, quantum fluctuations and information and patterns into that. So it could happen that all of the nature, that all of the reality, the way we feel reality, it is just the artifact and the projection of an hologram, of a 2D hologram, if we want to call it like that, where, where simply abstract quantum uh, patterns arise into something which is projected with fake profound, with a fake profoundness, with a fake depth, which is our apparent reality, which is simply this. The, the, the it's like when we look into a movie in a screen, we construct our interpretation of the pixels that we can see in the screen, that there is something coming from the background and coming into first into the front of the image. It's no profoundness. There's no third dimension. It's just something an artifact of our thought that we construct to make sense out of the pixels that we can see in the screen. And we construct a full 3D representation out of a 2D base layer. And that is what this anti-de Sitter conformal field space comes to say. It simply breaks my mind, and I like to dive into that deeper. But there, 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 there are some profound assumptions here, which they do not resist the the easy assumptions taken to the limit. And this lateral thinking, which, for instance, Einstein did. But okay, so uh, speed of light is constant, no matter how quickly you are looking into that in your frame of reference. Uh, that feels uncomfortable, so looks contradictory. How to solve this contradiction? Let's take something fundamental that we can call fundamental, which is the space and time, and let's make it flexible. So it makes more sense to have space and time that we can think about given and static and um, um, universal background, and we can come with our thinking and realize that it's just an illusion about that being the true background. The true background is much more tricky, that much less material, much less tangible that we can think of. Um, the same with matter. Looks like it's tangible. Then we start to think about that. It behaves simply like having nothing, but just some localized behavior in energy patterns. And we can find very uh, consistent ways of thinking about that. And again, we lose the solidity of matter as something tangible and fundamental within our reality. And one more deeper level into that, a deeper layer, is that what about energy looks fundamental? What if it is just patterns and quantum strange things which looks noisy, but it happens to uh, be aligned in some places for some periods of time, and we can feel the effects of energy and that into mass and so on. Um, what is what if there's only information and we are the and we live in an hologram and it looks like it being real? That is just it's just an artifact of something very abstract and very intangible. And probably the best way to think about that in order to resolve this, it's called non-duality. Maybe this hologram, maybe what is happening in this hologram is what the Lao Tse calls as the flow. It's something that you cannot grasp, but you can see the effects and see that it has two sides. It has it has matter and no matter. It has energy and mass as sides of the same coin. It has space and time as conflicting ideas, which seems to belong to the same underlying nature, but they, when you look at them, they seem incompatible. And this duality, it's difficult to reconcile if you want to think thoroughly about them. And the only way to grasp them and to accept it and make it um, one is try to look them from from a wider perspective and try not to be part of that and try to see as a whole unit and that is that should be the flow, the Tao. That is, if we want to discuss about them, probably we are talking about something different because we cannot fully fully understand it. But maybe the best quote that it resounds with me the most about all of these things about the illusory reality of nature, which could be even taken from the scientific, not only from a spiritual, not only from a spiritual way of thinking, but as well from the most profound scientific perspective and ways of thinking, and that is that at the, at, at at the very bottom, you can bend the spoon when you realize that there is no spoon.